Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's Comic Art Live. John Siuntres here from the Word Balloon Podcast, and I'm really excited for this hour. You're going to have a lot of fun because this guy's been cracking me up for years. It's so great to welcome him back. The creator of Grendel, the creator of Mage, and excellent work on so many iconic characters over the years. Please welcome Matt Wagner to the broadcast. Good to see you, Matt.
Hey, John. How are you, man?
Right,
we're trying to remember the last time I actually saw you in person. I can't quite remember when that was.
I know, my man. I literally hope to see you every San Diego. I was even at Rose City last year.
Oh, I wasn't last year. But Baltimore, you're usually at Baltimore too, and I'm often there. So Emerald City.
Yeah, man. No, I got to plan my West Coast trips to hopefully see you. And now, thankfully, because I've got tinfoil wrapped around my butt, Matt, because I've been having internet dropping issues all morning. But hopefully, we're going to get through this fine. But I know we've already got people listening and watching, and that's great. And
everybody, thanks for showing up.
Absolutely. Eli says hello. Hello,
Hi,
Eli. Good to see you, man. Absolutely. And
I'll give a little plug to Eli here. Eli and his partner in crime, Ben Granoff, run a podcast about the Grendelverse called The Devil in Details, which you can find on YouTube and Spotify and iTunes.
That sounds great, man. That's fantastic.
Very, very intricate, man. They go deep.
Well, Matt, I love the fact that, it's 30 years later and we're still talking about Mage and Grendel, and rightfully so. More than 34 years?
Almost
40 or almost 40? Oh, my God.
39 years, yeah.
Matt, wow.
Yeah.
But that's awesome, man. And truly, and I love how it kind of has fed into the narrative of Mage, but just, your own kind of observation. I think subtly in the subtext of the story.
Yeah, I say to people, one of the reasons the Mage trilogy took so long, of course, was it's a reflection of my life, and it's a allegorization of my life, and enough of my life had to pass by for me to be able to mythologize it in that fashion. Specifically, the last part took quite a while. And I realized when I got ready to start it that was because it was starring my kids, my wife and my kids. And I needed to have my kids grow up to see what sort of people they were going to be. Because I think if I would have tried to do it when they were still that age that they're depicted in the comic, I would have kind of idealized them a little bit more. I would have, and certainly they are idealized to a great degree in the story, but I knew a few more of their personal picadillos and understood them a little better once they had reached a certain state of maturity. So that's just how long it took. It wasn't the way I planned it, but I feel everything worked out for the best in the end.
That's awesome, man. Now I know you got affected by pencils down during this COVID period, right?
Yeah. So, I'm right in the middle of the my latest series for my latest Grendel series for Dark Horse, Devil's Odyssey, and it's slated to be 8 issues. 4 issues had been published when we were put on production hiatus. But they just recently gave me the go-ahead to finish up. So I'm now working on the final issue of that. It gets solicited, I think, around the end of January, and it's slated to start coming out again monthly beginning in April.
Okay, excellent, man. And
it's for all the Grendel fans out there. I have it leads directly into a sequel that I'm planning and doing sketches for right now, which is should be a cool, fun, really unexpected change in the Grendelverse. So
exciting. Very, very cool, man.
Yeah.
God, like, again, so tell me about Grendel's Odyssey in terms of where are you in the story and everything right now.
Well, when it was time to come back to Grendel, when I finished Mage, I decided to go back to Grendel, and it had been a while since I'd worked on Grendel, and it's set in that futuristic scenario where the term Grendel is a military rank, and it stars the cyborg Grendel Prime, and I just decided, I've done a lot of stories set in that that time frame and that narrative venue. So let's change things up a bit, and I decided let's send Grendel Prime into outer space. He's a cyborg; he can survive space travel, and it was kind of my homage to Heavy Metal magazine. The early days of Heavy Metal magazine. That was a huge influence on me when I was young. That was the first discovered it when I was probably 15 or 16 at a Kmart, I think, in the magazine racks. And it was the first comics I'd ever seen that were aimed specifically at adults, not at kids at all, that featured sex and violence and adult themes, and had a completely different aesthetic than the American comics at the time. So, this is very much my my homage to that, specifically with, having this kind of lone traveler going through space. It's kind of a riff on Gulliver's Travels as well, in that he goes to several different worlds, and they're each a kind of weird reflection of, stuff that went wrong or could go wrong in our world,
God, sounds great. That's excellent, man. Are you working on, I know you're working on some sketches for us.
Yeah, I was just
while we're talking.
So while we're doing this chat here, I'm going to be doing some live sketches. I have them kind of half started, and I'll be finishing them as we go, and they're all for sale. In the Comic Art live event, you can go to see my art dealer's booth. His name is Jim Warden. Again, that's Jim Warden. It's very easy to find. That's running across the bottom of the screen. There is a crawl that has Jim's information. You can contact him via Caps Hockey Fan. Oh, that's missing a C there in that crawl. It should be Caps Hockey Fan at yahoo.com. He's a fan of the Washington Capitals. Each of these pieces is $250, and if you like what you see, you can contact Jim and pick them off him directly. I'll be finishing them as we go here, and I'll flash them up at the screen. We got 4 different pieces, and we'll take it from there.
Do you want to give us a preview, or are they not ready to view yet?
It won't take me long to finish each one, and as they're done,
Okay,
I'll hold them up. Yeah.
That sounds great. Excellent. Matt, let's go back to the beginning, because you broke in through Comico. Wasn't Comico your first pro publisher?
It was, and I actually met the guys that formed Comico. We all went to art school together. I often get people coming up and asking me, how did you get your start? And I said, man, I'm just the wrong guy to ask, because I was in the right place at the right time. And certainly I took advantage of the opportunities I had, but I got on the elevator one day at the art school, and there was a guy with a Creation Conventions t-shirt on. And way back in the day, Creation was the only national convention chain. And I said, oh, comics, I love comics, and blah, 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 blah. We struck up a conversation, and eventually he hooked me up with pals of his, which were the early nucleus of Comico. And about 2 years after that, they all dropped out of school to try and start an independent publishing company. And about a year after that, I followed them.
Wow.
And that led to the initial black and white Grendel issues. And then at one point they decided they needed to make this is just before the giant black and white boom in the 80s. And it seemed like we have to move to color. And at that time they had signed Chuck Dixon and his then wife, Judith Hunt, to do a series called Evangeline, which was about a killer nun, a nun assassin for the Vatican in the future.
Immortalized by Matthew Sweet's fine song.
Indeed, yes, absolutely, yeah. But if you know anything about printing, it is cheaper to print 2 books at once due to the width of the printing press. You can fit 2 side by side, so why not do 2 at once and maximize your costs? And so they offered me the chance to develop a color book, and that turned out to be Mage.
Wow.
Again, learning curve all the way around in every stage at that point. For me, it was a big step. I would say initially anyway, I wasn't really ready for, but I hit the ground running and I learned as I went. And in regards to Mage, that really works in regards to the narrative, because the reader kind of sees me getting my power at the same time that my alter ego Kevin Matchstick gets his power. So that all worked out well, thank God.
And actually, Matt, it's great to talk to people who have that perspective of the 80s boom and then the 90s boom and then our current period that I suppose started about 20 years ago, I would say, in terms of where creator owned really kind of came back with a vengeance, and in the wake of Marvel's bankruptcy and their
well, John's got a glitch.
Well, I get the tag in while he.
That's okay. John had a glitch there, but yeah, we were talking about the early days of creator ownership, and it was literally just flying by the seat of our pants. Not we just kind of knew we didn't want to go the normal route and have all of our efforts just be lock, stock, and barrel owned by the publishing company, which was the de rigueur rule of the day back in everything before the 80s.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody, nobody knows this, but I actually got to participate in a Zoom chat with you probably a couple months back. And one of the coolest things that you were doing, and you were talking about a little bit, is how the progression of how your story and how your kids grew through that story. And I thought that was the coolest concept I've ever heard. And if you wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, we talked about it a little bit earlier with John, but yeah, the point was I had to see my kids grow up, and they did, and I just feel like one of the things I'm proudest about the Mage trilogy is that it very much feels like stages of a person's life, stages of a story. It certainly hangs together and is certainly cohesive. It certainly seems like it's done by the same guy, but it's done by the same guy at 3 utterly different stages of his life. And again, I'm very proud of how that comes across. And hang on here.
That's okay. I thought you froze too. I got nervous. Nobody wants to see me. That's for sure.
And I feel like it reached the point it needed to get to. I keep telling people I feel like I stuck the landing. That it came in where it was supposed to come in. It ended the way it was supposed to end. And the funny thing about that is that I think I talked about this when we talked previously too. The fact that especially for Mage, I distinctly tried not to think about Mage during the interims between the 3 different stages of it, between the 3 different volumes of the trilogy. For the main reason that at one point I realized, well, this isn't going to happen overnight, and it's gonna take a while between the 3 stages of the trilogy. So I really, really, really don't want to get locked into any certain ideas that might become stale if I get my head set on it, at a certain point. So again, like I said, I distinctly tried to not think about Mage. And then in each case with the second and the third book, things just reached a stage where all of a sudden I couldn't not think about Mage. All of a sudden, the only creative ideas I was having were in regards to Mage. And I realized, okay, now it's time to do Mage. So it was almost like Mage decided when it was time to do the second and third volumes more than I consciously did,
That's awesome. So is it fair to say that like your characters, they're 100% built around people correct? And so like, do you ever like when you're writing something, for example, like Batman, are you drawing from that same point?
Well, not so much from people I know, but from situations I know.
Okay.
Like, for instance, when I did Faces, which was the 3-part series I did for Legends of the Dark Knight way back in the day that featured Two-Face. At that point, my wife had a brief stint as being a realtor. So I included a realtor character. I was listening to her talk about the business of realty all the damn time, and I stuck in a real estate deal. In Grendel, I tend to incorporate situations that I'm in more than the personalities, like in Mage. So, like for instance, when I did the Christine Spar storyline, I was dating a woman that I had dated previously, and when we got back together in the interim, she had a child with another guy, and so for the first time, I got to see up close and personal this like kind of fierce maternal protectiveness.
Okay.
And so I incorporated that into the Christine Spar character. Shortly after that, we had broken up. I had dropped out of school to pursue comics, and I was kind of was living in the same area I had lived in when I went to the art college, but of course, not being in school, I was removed from that social scene. So I was feeling very isolated and alone. So that I incorporated that into the next stage of Grendel, into the Brian Lee Sung storyline. Following that, I met a woman and married into a big Catholic family. And so I incorporated that into the God and the Devil storyline. So I always say that, Mage is me looking in and Grendel is me looking out.
Wow. Okay. Very cool. That's very cool. Tom Kelly has a question in the chat. It says, what do you think were some of the things changed or presented as you saw your family grow and change that you put into Mage that you didn't expect?
Well, I can tell you one specific scene. There's in The Hero Denied, there's a scene where Hugo, Kevin's son, has been distinctly told, you're not. They're this big. They're captured by the bad guys. They're in a magical environment that looks like a fancy hotel suite, and the food that appears for them. There's this giant pile of glistening, beautiful, beautiful food, and it's surrounded by a ring of what looks like horrible scraps. And his mother, who's a witch, tells him, you can't eat the good looking stuff. That's fairy food. And if you eat the fairy food, you'll never be able to leave this place. But one night, he sneaks out in the middle of the night and eats some of it. Well, my son used to sneak out in the middle of the night and do some shit he wasn't supposed to do. So that's how I incorporated that into that,
Very cool. Well, hey, John, welcome back. I'm going to phase out again.
Stay on lifeguard duty because again,
here we go. I got the first piece ready.
Oh, let's see it. There we go. Oh, hold on. There we go. Outstanding, man. Look at that classic Superman. Fantastic. And I love that. I don't know if it's Kingdom Come or 38 Siegel or Schuster logo.
It's the Fleischer Superman cartoons.
Of course it is.
Yeah, it's the Fleischer Superman cartoons. Yeah.
That's outstanding. So
anyway, any of these pieces, if you're interested, the crawl running across the bottom of the screen is the information on how to contact my art dealer, and they are all available for purchase. And let's move on to the next one.
That's fantastic, Matt. I wanted to ask regarding your Vertigo work in particular. It almost seemed like, who was your editor for Sandman, Madam Xanadu?
I'll move on to this one then.
Oh, there you go. Let's see him. Let's see him again.
Sandman one, so
Wesley in his prime, absolutely, man. So yeah, tell me, because it really seemed like.
Okay. So here's the story of how that all came about.
Okay.
When Karen Berger was getting ready to form Vertigo. She liked my stuff. She had contacted me and wanted me to give her a pitch on, any sort of idea I had in mind. I particularly was a big fan of Guy Davis's work for a book he did for Caliber Comics called Baker Street. And if you've never seen Baker Street, it's a creator-owned book by Guy, and it's a female punk Sherlock Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
So modern updating of Sherlock Holmes, thoroughly outdates the, Benedict Cumberbatch version. And it was fantastic. And so I, via the publisher, Gary Reed, I was able to contact Guy. And I said, Guy, look, I love your stuff. I'd love to write something for you. I've got this situation at Vertigo where Karen Berger is asking me to give her a pitch. So let's think about something we could do together. And I said, I tell you what, go through the DC Who's Who and find some characters that appeal to you, and let me know what they are, and we'll go from there. So a little while goes by, and he sends me a list of Xeroxes of 3 characters out of the Who's Who's, and the hilarious thing was they were all guys wearing a hat and a cloak, and a long coat. But one of them was the Golden Age Sandman, and he had a note in there that said, well, I know they won't let us do this one because of Gaiman's Sandman, which of course had started to come into its popularity at that point.
Sure, yeah.
And my response is like, no, that's why they will let us do it, because at that point they hadn't quite figured out how to spin off Sandman. Of course, now they have many, many different spin-off.
Absolutely.
But if people are familiar with that narrative, in the first first issue, when Morpheus is imprisoned, magically imprisoned, there's a little side note about how his truncated consciousness is bleeding into the dreamscape, and it inspired this one guy, Wesley Dodds, to dress up in a kind of pseudo version of Morpheus's own battle gear with the helmet, and instead he wears a gas mask, and so that basically inspired him to become the Sandman in the real world. So I said, yeah, let's try and do something with that. Now at the time, I had just been starting to become a big fan of hard-boiled crime stuff.
Sure.
Specifically Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler, but some of the later writers too, Jim Thompson, David Goodis, stuff like that. Anyway, I said to Guy, all right, let's try and do something with this. Well, just a couple days later, Guy sent me his initial character sketches, where he completely redesigned the character to look much more grounded in reality, with this real gas mask and this kind of cyberpunk-looking gas gun. And damn, it just looked so good. I was like, oh, they're gonna go for this for sure. So I cooked up the story outline, and our idea was to kind of redefine this character, and it was all slated to be 4-issue story arcs, so that later, when they were put together, it would be about the thickness of a pulp magazine.
Fantastic, yeah.
And I wanted to achieve 2 different goals with that. When you think of hard-boiled crime stuff, you think of kind of a lot of hardcore kind of right-wing philosophy. Tough guys,
True. Yeah,
and broads and shit. And even though Hammett kind of created that, Hammett was a super progressive. He was brought up before the House Un-American Ethics Committee and refused to testify against other members of the Communist Party, and spent time in jail, and ultimately got out of that by enlisting in the army, and he was stationed in the Aleutian Islands, kind of as punishment. But I wanted to show this character back in the 30s. You think of progressive and liberalism and all that kind of starting in the 60s. It didn't start in the 60s. It started long before that.
Of course not.
So I wanted to have a kind of progressive character back in the 30s. And additionally, I took a lot of the specifics from the actual old Golden Age stuff. Like, for instance, there's an early scene where Wesley's getting ready to go out. I think it might even be the very first Golden Age story. And he gets ready to put on his Sandman gear, and he takes this little doll, this little effigy of himself, and tucks it into bed as he's going to go out to be the Sandman. And he bids it. He says, "Good night, Mr. Wesley Dodds," because now he's going to go become the Sandman. And I thought, wow, that's cool and weird. So we had that in the book. But then also, unlike most Golden Age characters at the time, his girlfriend knew who he was. His girlfriend knew his secret identity. So another kind of comic book norm we wanted to kind of toss on its ear was this, comic book relationships are so angst-ridden, So, oh, I can't be with you, or even to the point of, let's beat each other up and then fuck, We didn't want that. We wanted to have a relationship between a couple that liked each other, that genuinely liked each other, cared for each other, and supported each other. What a concept! So all of those things I was real proud with. I think we pulled them all off pretty well.
I didn't know until DC's 75th anniversary documentary about Bert Christensen, the co-creator of Golden Age Sandman with Gardner Fox.
Yep. Mm-hmm, yep.
And I didn't know he was a World War II, I want to say fighter pilot.
Yeah.
And died in action and everything.
Yep.
But Matt, I had no idea you took the essence of those early stories and really kind of expanded them into your first couple arcs of Sandman.
Yep.
That's fantastic. And really, God, not only
of course, all those early superhero stuff, of course, the trappings of the superhero world were not yet set, so they more resembled the pulp magazine stories that had originally inspired them, specifically the Shadow and the Spider and the Whisperer and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that really came across in those early Golden Age Sandman stories. It was something we wanted to continue. And speaking of Sandman,
boom, there we go. There's sketch number 2, and again, right under us on the crawl, you get 250, Matt.
These are all 250, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yep. And you see the shipping costs to the U.S. and Canada and overseas. You want to email Jim Warden at capshockeyfan@yahoo.com for more information if you want to purchase one of these lovely pictures. But pictures, knucklehead that I am. but honestly, Matt, I really tell me about like collaborating then with Steve, because he was like the alternate writer on the.
He was, the reason that came about is
Steve Siegel, everybody.
Steve Siegel, yeah, who has since gone on to work on a whole bunch of other stuff. He's the co-creator of Ben 10 with his fellow writers at Men of Action.
Men of Action, absolutely. Joe Casey and all the guys.
Of, Big Hero 6.
Yes.
But I knew Steve was a fan of my stuff, and I had read a few things by Steve that I really liked. But there was a point where I had to turn my attention to Grendel at that point. And I knew I didn't have the time or the mental capacity to handle both of these books on a monthly basis. So I brought up to Karen the idea of having a co-writer. So Steve and I got together. He came up to visit me one weekend, and we weren't sure it was going to work, but we decided to give it a shot, and it turned out it worked very, very nice. The way we worked that is that I worked at what's sometimes called Marvel style plot and dialogue, whereas I would write a plot for the issue. So instead of a full script, which in comic book terms means you count down the exact number of panels per page, all the word balloons and captions are already there and written, has a very distinct description of each and every panel. I would just say page 1, here's what happens. And then that's left up to the artist to translate, and how many panels he wants to break that into are his business. Occasionally I'd have a spare line of dialogue or whatever here and there just to add a bit of texture and atmosphere. Then Guy, or not only there, we had a variety of artists on Mystery Theater, but the main returning artist was Guy, would do the pencils. And then Steve would add the full script over top of that. Steve would completely generate the dialogue, the captions. But we were always in close contact as to what the theme of each storyline was going to be and what we were hoping to achieve with each one. Worked out very, very smoothly. We still fondly remember the experience to this day, both of us.
It's seriously, man, 70 issues. It's a great run. I still love it so much. And I in fact, someone wanted to know they just said wish there were more. And I don't know if that's something you guys would ever, or you in particular, would ever want to go back to and write more Wesley and Diane stuff.
Possibly, it does come to a specific ending, kind of. They go off to Europe and the war is approaching.
True,
or it's actually already there, but I don't know. Possibly, they did a sequel later that was set in modern time.
Yes, spiritually, it moved on to a different character that was in the Iraq War.
Yes, exactly,
and that was interesting. But man, I'll tell you, not only that, but also the way you played with that Golden Age period and introduced like the Crimson Avenger and others into your series, and it really felt like you were the one Vertigo guy that really got to still dip into the DC universe when you wanted. And I'm so thrilled with that, because it really was this more textualized look at the Golden Age. And I mean,
and the reason was I never asked. I just wanted to I kind of did that on Madame Xanadu too, when I was doing Madame Xanadu for
100%, man. Yeah.
But yeah, we had a lot of fun doing those redefinitions. I mean, one of my favorite ones was when we did the Hour Man. That was a blast.
Yes.
And there again, we in one of the early adventures, I found a reference to where initially he used to advertise in the classifieds, and he called himself the Man of the Hour. So we incorporated that, and how would somebody come up with the idea to wear a costume as opposed to just your street duds,
Sure.
Yeah, it was great fun. And then we even did a crossover with I guess you'd call it a pseudo crossover with James Robinson. James, also an old time friend of mine. He worked on wrote the very first Grendel Tales series. But we decided to coordinate between the two of us, and in Mystery Theater, we had an arc called The Mist, which outlined the origins of the Mist, which was the Golden Age Starman's one of his main villains.
Yes.
And then James later had Wesley and Diane, both in their late 70s at that point, show up in the contemporary Starman arc. So it was kind of a crossover that wasn't quite a crossover. But that's the way we like doing shit.
But absolutely, man. And also, was it you or Guy that kind of changed Wesley's look in his civilian guise? And I mean, again, Golden Age, classic. I mean, you could mistake him for Bruce Wayne. You could make, even with Clark Kent, if Clark wasn't wearing his glasses, just totally square-jawed, strong guy.
I forget if it was. I'll give the credit to Guy, because Guy was the main visualizer of all of that. But I did know we kind of agreed we didn't want him to be just another version, just another movie star. We wanted him to seem we wanted it to seem like this wasn't something he would gravitate towards if it wasn't for this mystical influence of his dreams being invaded by the absence of Morpheus from the dreamscape.
Sure.
He was an aesthete. He would prefer to sit home and read books and not go out and crawl through the night in a gas mask and a gun.
He's like potato shaped. I mean, he's this dumpy little guy that again achieves the effect with the gas, with the mask, with the fedora and the overcoat and everything.
Yep.
And I love that. And also I loved in James' story, as an old man, had his gun in his little shaky old man hand, but he was still the Sandman. And and that moment that Jack Knight is like, oh my God, he's smiling. He's loving this.
Yeah,
and it's true.
He hadn't given up the fight. Yep.
Yeah. And truly, man, that's what made him and Diane, I think, the special characters that you guys infused in your writing and art. I really, it's one of my absolute favorite series of that era. And,
now another, since we're on that same kind of subject, another project I did in recent years that also covered that same kind of ground was the Django Zorro crossover that I co-wrote with Quentin Tarantino. And it was, Django is set in just pre-Civil War. And the original Zorro stuff is set very early in the 18th or 19th century. So unless we were going to have a new Zorro, Don Diego had to be old, and it was fun to portray this. In fact, the first captions of the first issue, they're narrated by Bernardo, who is Don Diego's
Alfred,
and his Alfred, And the first caption was, and for some, the call to adventure never fades, and we really had to kind of get that across. How could we make this believable that this old guy was able to do this? Well, it did cause him aches and pains. It didn't come without a cost. That was when the possibility to do that project came around. Dynamite asked me, he said, we're talking about doing a Django Zorro crossover. Would you be interested in co-writing this with Quentin Tarantino? And I was like, well, that's never going to happen. But sure, So, and then I kind of forgot about it. And about 2 months went by, and the guys at Dynamite called me and they said, look, we sent Quentin all of your Zorro stuff, and he loves it, and he wants you to come down to his place like next weekend. So I did, and I spent two days at his place, and
wow.
And we hacked out this story. And in fact, after the whole first day, I was going to come back the next day for about half a day before I had to catch my flight home. But I went back to my hotel and I sat down and wrote like the first 6 pages right away. I was like, look, we need to establish what this is going to be, what the flavor of it's going to be. And so it all just worked out swimmingly. It was neat because when Quentin first starts working with somebody new, he likes to screen movies with you, so you both get in the same headspace. And he's got.
What'd you watch?
Well, he's got this really cool screening room in his house. Fits about 50 people. And we watched like 4 different movies. We watched 2 full-length movies. One was a swashbuckler called Son of Monte Cristo, which featured featured a masked, almost Zorro-esque kind of character.
Okay.
But then the other one was the story we actually based it on. It was one of Sam Fuller's first films. It was called The Baron of Arizona. Starred a very young Vincent Price. And we felt entitled to adopt the story because it was based on a real story. This real dude that pulled off this incredibly strange and complicated con scheme back in the 1800s. And it's too long to go into. His name was James Reeves, and you should look it up on Wikipedia, anybody that's interested, because it's fascinating. And then we watched 2 chapters of 2 different Zorro serials as well.
Oh, fun. Sure.
Yeah, one of the neatest parts was all of it was on celluloid. It was none of it was on DVD. He has a huge collection. He had a screen master, a guy that works. There was a guy back in the booth that was threading these things up all the time. I never saw him. He was invisible.
Wow.
But he was there, and everything was on celluloid. Yeah, pretty cool.
That's amazing. You know what I love, man? I know you have a philosophy about keeping characters in their time periods properly.
Yeah.
And I really do. If you don't mind expanding on that, because you think characters work best in that era that they were created, right?
I do, and I meet a lot of resistance on this sometimes. But like for instance, the one that's easiest for me to go to is the Shadow. The Shadow works best in the 30s. He works only in an age when every man on the street had a hat on. Otherwise, you're like, who's the bozo in the hat? And he also only works in a stage when New York City had shadows. I don't know when the last time you were in New York City is. Last time you were in New York City, it's lit up like a pinball machine all over the place. There's no shadows anywhere. Similarly, Batman. Batman could never function in today's world where everybody's carrying a camera and TMZs everywhere, and no billionaire could lead a secret life like that. Superman. Superman works with just those pair of glasses because in those days, people didn't get their photo taken all the time, and also taking photographs wasn't very quick, so you wouldn't be able to catch many candid or casual shots of Superman. You move ahead, and the kind of superhero zeitgeist that has replaced the secret identity is the X-Men. It's a group of characters with superpowers who are exposed, who aren't allowed to have a secret identity, who would like to be anonymous but can't be. I think we're only now seeing the changes for the next stage of this sort of thing. But that's just my personal take on it. I like them best in the periods they were created in. I'll give a little plug here to a book I deeply adore, which I'm always surprised how many comic fans don't know about this, by the novelist Tom DeHaven. Back when it was Superman's 50th anniversary, DC contracted him to write a novel, and a Superman novel, and it's called It's Superman, and it's set in the 30s, and it's fabulous. It's very much of its time period. I mean, one of the things I love best about it is, Clark's not the sharpest tool in the shed. You know what I mean? He's just a farm boy. They make fun of what a shitty speller he is as a reporter.
It's a great book. I agree with you, man.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, here's our next piece.
There you go. So let us talk a bit more about Batman, because again, I love that you took a lot of those early, were they 8-page stories, 6-page stories? From detective, from literally the first handful of Batman stories. And again, you expanded. Batman and the Monster Men certainly comes to mind.
Batman and the Mad Monk too. Yeah.
Yes.
Again, the thing I like about those is, like I said, the superhero tropes aren't very established yet. And so it very much feels like these guys are just kind of making it up as they go along. So it has a certain unfettered freshness to it that, I look at contemporary superhero comics, and boy, it's just feels like it's been done before a whole lot, But that stuff, not so. That stuff, again, is drawing most of its inspiration from the pulp magazines that inspired the young creators that were responsible for those early comics. In fact, the very first Batman story in Detective Comics number
27. Yeah, Detective 27.
That is utterly and completely a direct ripoff of a Shadow novella. It's called, I think it's called The Chemical Syndicate.
I was going to say, I know Chemical was definitely in the title. That sounds right.
Beat for beat, the visualizations, all of it. It is straight from, it's a direct ripoff. Okay, inspiration. But again, I like the fact that these guys were taking their inspiration from silent movies, from early pulp magazines, not from other comic books, which is just feels like a retread to me,
As someone who has written, God, The Shadow, Green Hornet, Grendel, all these like Hunter Rose Grendel, all these characters that are in the 30s. There you go, absolutely, and reminding everyone too that you can purchase these sketches from Matt if you go to and I'm going to wait now and say that again, the shipping, they're $250 each. They're not up for bid. This is the price. $22 shipping for the US, $70 for Canada. Overseas, contact Jim Warden at capshockeyfan@yahoo.com.
That's it. Yep.
All right, commercial over. So tell me the comparisons of all these great heroes that you've worked on that are flitting around in 1930s New York, if not Gotham society. And let's talk about let's start with Bruce Wayne and Hunter Rose. And I mean, obviously one's a hero, one's a villain, but yeah, just tell me about the men.
Well, the funny thing with that is when I did the Batman Grendel crossover back in the 80s, that was kind of put together by Kamiko, my initial publisher, in coordination with DC. And at that point, we had just finished the Christine Spar storyline. And so my natural inclination was, and that was such a popular run, my natural inclination was to make it a female Grendel to fight Batman. And I turned in a pitch for it, and it was awful. And luckily, my editor at the time, later my sister-in-law, Diana Schutz, had the balls to tell me this is terrible. Because it was too convoluted, It was I didn't, in my mind, I couldn't really meld the two worlds, and so Grendel was a fictional character in Batman's world that this woman becomes obsessed with. So it was just too long getting to the good shit, And she said, "Look, Hunter Rose, Bruce Wayne, they're not that different. Just do that." And it was just like boing, the light went off inside my head. And there's certainly variations of a theme, aren't they? The urbane man about town,
Yeah.
But you were saying there about the fact that I've worked on all these characters. I did a whole bunch of this stuff for, in addition to Batman and Grendel, I did a whole bunch of these sort of characters for Dynamite.
Yes.
And so
the Shadow run was great. Your Green Hornet
I did
run.
The Shadow. I did the Green Hornet year one. I did the Spirit.
Absolutely, Spirit was amazing.
Again,
and Zorro, yes.
All these guys are guys in a hat and a cloak. They bear a certain similarity to each other. And so to me, it was like, how do I figure out how to make each one of them separate and different? So like for instance, Don Diego is Don Diego de la Vega is an aristocrat. An aristocrat who has egalitarian leanings and wants justice for all the people, not just for the rich.
Sure.
Britt Reed, on the other hand, is the son of a newspaper man and the owner of a newspaper. So tried to incorporate a certain amount of the presence of the newspaper in the Green Hornet's dealings. Like if you get to the end of the Green Hornet year one, you'll realize that journalism had as much to do with bringing down the main bad guy as the Green Hornet's vigilante activities. The Spirit, of course, has its own different vibe that I tried to hit, So even though each of these characters bear a certain similarity, if you search hard enough, you can individualize each of them. For me, the Shadow was the golden nugget in that bucket because I was a huge Shadow fan from way back when. So it was kind of when I finally got the chance to get my hands on him. He's a complex character because there's several different versions of the Shadow. The purists point to the pulp magazines, but at the same time, the radio show that ran during the 30s and 40s, I would say was reached a far broader audience.
No question.
But of course, that's a completely different Shadow. The Shadow in the pulps couldn't turn invisible.
Right.
But then, as I got ready to do my Shadow, I realized there's a whole section of the audience that might be buying this that would know him from the Alec Baldwin film in the 90s, and there's good stuff in that film. I think ultimately it has a very kind of confused sense of tone, but there's good stuff in there. I like the inclusion of the fact that our main character had a bad side at one point. He's almost doing this out of atonement. He has learned to harness his personal shadow to confront what evil lurks in the hearts of men.
Yeah. Tell me about the interplay between Batman and the Shadow, because going back to Denny O'Neil when he was writing both comics back in the 70s, I really did love this connection that he established.
Yeah. And in that case, the Batman directly acknowledged his creative or his the debts of his origin to the Shadow.
He saw the Shadow in action when he was a young boy with his parents.
Yeah,
it's pre Joe Chill or whoever you decide was the killer of Bruce's parents. But that was great, and I also loved. I remember in Denny's story where the Shadow presented him with a 45, and Batman's like, "Yeah, thanks, that's okay.
Yeah,
I'm all right."
Yeah.
So tell me about the interplay in when you were writing Lamont and Bruce Wayne, and what or I should say Kent Allard, I suppose. And Bruce Wayne.
I didn't work on the Batman Grendel crossover.
No, you didn't do Batman Shadow.
Batman Shadow crossovers, but of course, I do compare and contrast the characters. I don't adhere to the kind of psychotic approach to each of these characters. Certainly, I would say Ken Allard's a little darker than Bruce.
Sure,
but Bruce isn't. The recent trailer for the new Batman movie just came out, and the guy says to him, what are you? And he says, "I am vengeance." And that's not my take on Batman at all. Batman isn't out for vengeance. If he was out for vengeance, he'd be the Punisher.
Okay, sure.
He's out to make sure that what happens to him never happened to anybody else. He's out to ensure that nobody goes to bed without their loved ones that night, still in the world, like he had to do.
Yep.
The modern take on the character, I was talking with Nick Darrington about this recently, and we were both kind of lamenting the fact that there's not much of the Dark Knight detective in the current take on Batman. He's not very detective-y. He's
interesting.
Pretty much a paramilitary character at this point.
Okay.
And Batman's, the reason he dresses up in that costume is not for armor. It's to scare people. It's to scare bad guys. And, if he has to resort to armor, truthfully, I think in Batman's mind, if he has to punch the guy, he's doing something wrong. The costume didn't work. He didn't get to terrorize the guy, the right way.
Sure.
Similarly, even though the Shadow never really hesitates when it's time to, pull the trigger on somebody, I don't consider him just a laughing maniac. He too is out to kind of expose, pluck the weed of crime, pluck the efforts of bad people. Again, if he was just an executioner, there'd be a trail of bodies all over the place. And that's not really what happens in the stories. When he's backed against the wall, the guns come out and he lets them have it. But he doesn't just shoot for no reason.
I understand. Yeah. That was honestly, man, I've been neglecting the chat because I really wanted to hear those contrasts between some of these characters. So that was great. I'm going to go back now and I see well, first of all, Gore Vidal says, in 1983, as a kid, I discovered Grendel and V for Vendetta around the same time. These protagonists in comics changed my expectations for what a comic book should be. And then Lipex says, love Sandman Mystery Theater. It was one of my all-time favorite series. He says Diane and Wesley, one of the best, was the best relationship in comics. I totally agree. They were a team. They were a team.
Yep.
So, and also, yes, was there a character for
also, if you go back, let me just point out, if you go back and look at that run, we styled it so that every 12 issues, at the end of every year, their relationship went through one significant change. It advanced in some fashion.
Yeah.
Again, trying to give a real world and a real life approach to the sort of relationships that tend to remain static and unchanging in traditional comics, you know.
Did editorial ever not allow you to use a specific character in Sandman Mystery Theater?
Not in Sandman. They got upset in when I was using John Jones in Madame Xanadu.
Okay. So they just said no? They made you change it?
Huh?
They made you change it?
It was too late. They only realized after we were already 3 or 4 issues in. So yeah.
That's fantastic, man.
Yeah, they made a change. There's a scene where she gets dumped in the river, and John Jones, who has been throughout the whole story in his kind of fedora hat disguise that he was throughout the 50s.
Yeah.
He dives in to save her, and we see this green Martian hand come up to grab her and pull her out. And they made us change the green to like teal blue. I don't know what the fuck that was supposed to achieve, but whatever.
Honestly, man, no, all those nods to all those Golden Age, and then obviously with John, Silver Age characters, or like they're in front of Grant's gym and somebody just mentions Ted, and they're talking about Wildcat. I just love that stuff. Scott Dunbar's watching us, man, and is saying how much he's enjoying looking at your sketches today.
Thanks,
Great stuff. Very cool. That's awesome. Mike Grell wrote a novelization of John Sable Freelance. Have you considered writing one for Grendel, Devil by the Deed? Now, I know there was a Grendel novel a few years back as well.
That was a Grendel Prime novel, and that was written by Greg Rucka.
Yes, it did.
Novelist. Way back in the day, though, again, around the time of the Christine Spars storyline, there was an editor at Ballantine, a woman at Ballantine, who read and loved she liked Devil by the Deed, and she loved the Christine Spars storyline. And so they commissioned me to write a Grendel novel. It was going to be basically what that guy just suggested there, a novelization of Devil by the Deed, fleshed out. And there again, I wrote the whole thing, and I turned it in, and Diana Schutz told me, this is terrible. And so I finally just decided, my medium is comics. I know a lot of comics writers want to get into writing film. I don't really have those aims. That's not my medium. I like to say to people, I'm not what I would call a great writer. I'm not what I would call a great artist, but I feel like I'm pretty great at combining those two things into a synthesis that's greater than the sum of its wholes. Or the whole is,
I'm with you, but some of it's all absolutely. It's only one whole, but God bless you. It's all good. No, that absolutely. And people always ask, and look at that. Outstanding, man. So we got Grendel, Superman, Batman, and
I'll flip through them all again here.
Yeah.
This is the most recent one, Grendel.
Lovely. There he is, the Dark Knight. Looks great. Looks amazing. Here, I should actually, here we go. We'll solo you. Shame on me.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
There we go. Great Wesley Dodds. Look at that. Sandman. Outstanding. I have a quick sketch that you did for me of Wesley back in the day. And fantastic Superman. Absolutely, man. All iconic. All with that Wagner stamp that you put on everything you do, Matt. I mean, and seriously, it's so great to reread Mage and early Grendel. And like you said, watch the evolution of your art and your storytelling. And
my approach to my art has always been to kind of keep things simple. I often refer to, there's a famous quote by Edgar Allan Poe that when it comes to a short story, every word has to tell. And in comics, I feel the same way. Every element has to tell. Every word has to tell, but also every line has to tell. And I don't know, too many lines is boring to me. I like it simple. I like it direct. Some of the greatest samurai were also not only great warriors, they were great artists. If you go look up some samurai art, it's really, really lovely. And what's powerful about it is that they would try and make each brushstroke brief and descriptive to the utmost degree. And so their philosophy was that every brushstroke should be as life-bringing and as creative as a sword stroke is destructive. and I really tried to always take that approach to my stuff as well. I like to have a certain lushness to things, but I like to keep the actual elements to a very simple degree. I'm the same with sort of music I like. I love punk rock and garage rock and stuff that's of a very basic nature, and yet digs deep to the heart of the emotion it's trying to convey.
It comes through, Matt. Absolutely. And God, it was a pleasure, watching all this stuff. I'm going to bring Bill in because they're going to make me jump to the next room and talk to David Mack. But I want to thank you for, as always, a great conversation. And when the Grendel series gets back on the schedule, come on Word Balloon as well. And
sure.
We'll talk more about this.
April's the premiere of when it picks back up. So
okay, but yeah, we can talk maybe in February when it's time to order through previews or whatever.
You know how to find me.
So fantastic, Bill. I'll let you hand off. I'll hand off to you and everybody. If you want to watch another conversation with me and David Mack, we'll be doing that at the top of the hour. But thank you very much.
I haven't seen it in a long time either.
Absolutely, man. Always a pleasure, buddy. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, John. Hey, Matt.
Hey, Bill.
It's a pleasure to finally meet you, man.
Yeah.
I know. Well, we've been emailing enough, and I forgot. I'm going to show you something. I actually have an original piece of art from you. I mean, and you'll laugh. This is probably in the first year that I started collecting original art, and I really didn't have any savvy. I didn't quite understand the whole process. You paying for something, and sometimes, I was reading stories about how you could go up and get a free sketch or something like that. And it was at San Diego. It's probably like 2002 or 3. And I saw you, and there was no line in front of your booth. So I walked up to you, and I had like a sketch pad, and I said, being dumb, I just handed it to you. I'm like, you're like, what do you want me to do with this? And I'm like, I'd like something from Mage, right? Remember I told you it's my favorite thing. And so this is what you drew for me.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And
in keeping with that, so I don't know if you were checking in earlier watching what we were doing, but I was working on sketches that were for sale while we were doing this chat. Mm-hmm. So I do that. I do these finished sketches. Here, I'll show you the Superman one I did.
Very nice.
There we go. So, I have these that are very finished kind of sketches, but I've always had this attitude of, anybody that brings me a board or one of my books that they want signed, I'm more than happy to do those sort of quickie doodles. Mm-hmm. I do those for free for the asking, anytime, anywhere, no problem. Because I feel it's they literally take me seconds. I feel that's the least I can do for somebody that's interested in my work and supports my work by buying my books.
Right. Well, I can tell you, back then I just didn't know what was the right etiquette for those kinds of things. I look at it now, and I would never.
It changes from person to person, basically.
All right. Well, that's what I've gathered. But today it's like I would never hand a sketchbook over to an artist and say do a sketch. But I know that's totally common, and it happens a lot. It's the expectation of a lot of fans. But at the same time, having worked closely with many artists and everything, that I've over the years now, it's like I would never not want to hand over some cash, as part of a sketch you were going to do for me, or I'd rather have one of those finished pieces that you're showing right there.
Well, those little pieces like the piece I did for you there, they are almost, in my mind, I think of them as visual signatures almost. Like especially if you want a Grendel, if you want a Kevin Matchstick, if you want a Batman, I peel those guys off really fast. That's deep in the genetic memory of my hand at this point, But again, I feel I'm absolutely overjoyed to do that for anybody that asks. So once regular conventions start up again and anybody sees me there, don't hesitate to bring me a backing board, or even better, I like doing it in the actual books, because then it's more of a identified keepsake,
Yeah. Oh, without question. Absolutely. No, that's good to know. I mean, I imagine every artist is probably different on what they're willing to do, but yeah, like you're saying, it's a signature. I mean, that's like Simonson when he would, he'd draw that and he put like the Thor frog or something inside the O or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's just like it's all comes up from memory when you do it. I know. I think that literally took you like 30 seconds.
Yeah, I was gonna say it helps for us guys to draw fast, like me and Simonson.
Exactly. No, I've gotten a couple things from him too, and it's about the same.
Yeah.
But no. So I'm really I hope the panel went well, because there's big storms in the area, and so I got knocked off the internet twice. And
where are you, Bill?
I'm in Northeast Ohio.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was kicked off 2 times, and I kind of got them through I was managing the Simonson panel, so that's why we were having so many delays.
John got bumped once in the middle of ours, but Chad jumped in and took over for him. So yeah, it all went fine.
All right. Well, I talked with Chad, and I was like, man, I'm so glad you were able to do that for us. And I didn't realize that you and he have done the Hero Initiative.
The previous one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I thought I was throwing him into a crazy situation, and he was like, nah, I've talked with Matt many times. Mm-hmm. But I do appreciate you, everything that you've done, for the show and being a part of the panel. That's
sure, my pleasure, man. And thanks for organizing this. I think in these days when everybody's really hungry for a convention experience, I think this has gone over pretty well with a lot of people.
We've had a good attendance. We peaked at earlier today at over 1,000 people on the site at one time.
Right on.
And I think I haven't really checked the sales since about noon, but we sold over $700,000 in comics.
Wow.
I know. I was like, that's much more than we sold on the first one.
Right on. Well, I hope you continue to do them. Jim told me you're planning one possibly in May. Is that right?
Yeah. We'll do another one. I'm going to do them every 6 months. I mean, because I don't think cons are really going to come back in full force even this next year. So I think I might as well keep doing these, and I'm enjoying them. It's been a lot of fun, and
that's the important part. As soon as it becomes a chore, you should think about maybe not. But yeah,
right. Oh no, well, I used to own a con, and Big Wow Comic Con when it was.
Oh yeah, I've heard of Big Wow. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun, but man, it killed you. Doing a brick and mortar one. This is a little bit easier. I just kind of I've got a couple weeks lead time to kind of prep it and organize the panels and things, but. So it is a lot easier, but it's gotten busy enough. I'm definitely not going to do it by myself next time. I'm going to bring in some helpers at different points, but like I told you, I mean, Word Balloon is John's such a better interviewer than I am, but I did want to say, at least to your face, that, I mean, for me, you really made comics fun again, in the 80s when, like I told you, Elementals and Mage were my favorite books. And it was just because they weren't the standard Marvel or DC book coming out, and it just it made me. I remember pulling them off the newsstand at my at my local comic shop, and it really it blew me away to see independent work that was done so well. It wasn't some little cheapo ash can thing that you really weren't going to appreciate. When you saw those books, you knew that there was so much care put into them, and it was you really kind of changed my path, because I was getting really bored with the same old. I was reading Thor and X-Men, and it was just at that point in time wasn't really fun for me. And you definitely made comics fun for me.
My approach has always been the comics have to be fun for me. I do this because I grew up loving comics, and I love the experience of reading a comic. But it's why I've always tried to push myself in different directions, because why I keep changing Grendel specifically over and over and over again. You could say Mage changes pretty regularly too during the course of this trilogy, but because my thought is, if it's not interesting to me, it's not going to be interesting to my readers. If I feel like I'm treading water, they're going to know it. And so I hope to keep going until I break down and die. My ideal for this is Charles Schultz, who he finished Peanuts, he laid down his pen, and he died 3 days later.
Well, no, that is true. I've read that. But I mean, that's a great way to look at it, right? You're gonna draw it till you drop.
Yep, pretty much so. Yep.
Or create till you drop. You've written a lot too. So. Yep. But again, I sincerely appreciate it. I'll be talking with Jim after the show about some stuff too. So. If there's ever anything that I can do for either of you, just please let me know. Anything you want me to share, anything I can, help promote. I know that, with Jim being your rep, he doesn't send out a lot of PR newsletter for me. But I'll prod him a little bit, because
sure.
At this day and age, it's
I'm totally on board. If you want to have me back in May, we'll be with something. Yeah.
Fantastic. That would be great. All right, Matt, thanks again, and thanks to everybody who's tuned in. I really appreciate it. Like John said, there's a David Mack panel going on, Paulo Rivera after that, and then John Lucas after that. And then I'll do a con recap at 7:00 Eastern tonight as well. So again, Matt, thank you very much. And
thanks, Joe. Thanks very much.